I was around all of these senior executives that were, their mid 50s, 60s, and they were constantly talking about how they couldn't wait to cash out or retire and go own some small business somewhere close to where they grew up or whatever. And I'm like, at 28, I thought, well, why wait? Why not do that now?
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the show. And I am extremely excited today about today's guest, the first guest on the show that we'll publish. And as I was thinking about, who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to bring on? I have a long list of people. And when I was thinking about other shows I've been on and people I've really just connected with and want to learn more from, it felt very natural to start with none other than my friend, Jason Wright. And Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. I'm honored and I'm proud of you. Congratulations on the show. This has been a long time coming. You're going to crush it. I mean, you are in your element. You're in your lane. So I'm honored to be a part of it, my man.
Love it. So like a little bit of backstory here is this has been something I've been wanting to do for a while. Have a podcast. I've just done solo episodes, but the interviews specifically. And my goal for the month, I know you're a big goal guy, which is one of the things we're going to talk about too. Goal for the month was just to do one, make the goal really simple and easy. And so I have a monthly accountability partner, set that goal for May. And if I don't do it, then I have to Venmo him $50. So I don't want to do that. And I'm just excited to do this. So a big theme of the show is going to be breaking big things down into small actionable steps. And so I found that to be like the most useful thing in my life, as well as studying others. So that's something we'll talk about too. And I want to give a quick background about you for the listeners here and dive into some things. So you purchased your first company at the age of 28, and then you spent about 16 years owning, operating different businesses from real estate to restaurants and construction. And you're also a speaker and you do coaching for salespeople, and you share a lot of these goodies now online with your blog, jasonwrightnow.com, as well as the Jason Wright podcast and newsletter. So when I think about what I appreciate about you, Jason, is that you've seemed to have found things that, one, you're good at, and whether that be some of the business stuff or maybe acquiring businesses along the way. And then two is you found things that you love, and whether that's things such as your wife and kids, or it's, I didn't know you in the prior chapters of Jason, but this current chapter seems to be like, you love putting out, actionable sort of knowledge and like testing things yourself and being like this very super healthy version of yourself. And so that is contagious. And so I want to talk about that. And then the third thing, which I maybe value the most out of all of it, I don't know, they're all pretty great, but you're just a goofball. And so like having met you, and we've chatted a handful of times and been on your show a couple times and follow you on the socials, but I want to dig into that too. And I'm curious if that's always been the case to sort of like have an appreciation for life and not take things too serious. So yeah, that being said, let's dive into things. I want to kind of start back maybe a few chapters in the book of Jason and start maybe, so what you went to business school, you got your MBA. I know you have done a lot of things since then, but like, what were you trying to do back then? Like, how did you look at, career?
Yeah, that's a better question than you realize, Mitchell, because the reason why I did it was for the dumbest reasons possible, that I'm in this chapter of life, to kind of use that very perfectly stated word, chapter. Back then, I went to business school, man, because I was the first member of my family to graduate from college. I went to a no-name school, and I don't mean that bad. I love Stephen F. Austin State University, but, I'll never forget whenever I was in one of my first jobs, we went around the table talking about where we went to school, and no one had ever heard of Stephen F. Austin State University, although I loved it. But I always had this chip on my shoulder, being a first-generation grad, and not having that credential that I thought was so important, and still feeling very insecure. So I went on to business school and at SMU, Cox School of Business, got an MBA, thinking I was going to go into private equity. not because I necessarily wanted to, not necessarily because I wanted to be uber wealthy, not because I just loved doing deals, not because I loved M&A, but because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. It fed into the image I wanted to portray. Successful, SMU's in Highland Park. Highland Park is really, it's a great area. I mean, I wanted to be in that ecosystem. So ultimately, and it was weird, man, one of the things, and this is something that the listener, I hope, will gather from this story, it wasn't probably 3 weeks into business school that I realized that a lot of the people that were there were working for big Fortune 500 companies, brilliant, all of them smarter than me. And most of them wanted to do what I had been doing since I was 28, which was own their own business. They didn't care if it was a popsicle stand. They didn't care if, like in my case, it was a real estate firm. They just wanted to own their own shop and do their own thing. Now, there were some of them that were trying to break out of a technical engineering standpoint, trying to get into more of a business-related career, or they were just trying to get a promotion at work that required a graduate level degree. But for the most part, they wanted to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And I had already done that with my degree in journalism from SFA. But yet here I was. And so that's what I thought I wanted to do. But I realized, and the older I get and the further I get from that, Mitchell, I realized it was all kind of just a facade. It was part of this, me living up to the image that I had created that others had of me, that I was this sharp business guy, going to crush it, doing deals, going to buy and sell companies, going to have, wealth beyond measure, all these stupid things. That really, at the end of the day, don't matter. That's why I ended up at graduate school. And I mean, literally, I was transitioning I was bored with real estate, going to sell my companies and go do private equity, and did some deals with some guys. And that was great and all, but that's why I ended up at SMU.
Okay. So what are you 47 right now?
Yes, I am, Mitchell. Thank you for reminding the audience that I'm nearly 50 years old.
47. I will say 47. I don't know, going on 37. You look very, very young. And I think if you were to maybe you know about this, but there's some concept where you could look at the cells in your body to see at the molecule level how old you are. So if you're just listening to this, Jason has figured out a way to tap into the fountain of youth. But we're going back to the early days. So this was, how old were you at SMU?
So it was an executive MBA program. You had to have at least 15 years experience. So at that time, I think I entered at 37, maybe. So it was about a decade ago, just about.
Okay, gotcha. And so back at 28, what made you decide to buy a company, and how did you do that at 28?
Yeah, man. So I was really at that time, and this isn't patting myself on the back, but I was wiser than I even realized at that time. So I was traveling all over the country, working for the Home Depot at the time with this special program of would-be executives reporting directly to the second guy in charge, Dennis Donovan, who was Robert Nardelli, the CEO's right-hand man. All I had to do was keep my nose clean and not screw up, and I probably would have been a division president or something like that. But what I realized, man, is that I wanted to start a blueprint for life. I knew that I was not wired to be the 30-year corporate guy. And to me, the only reason why you do anything is to be at the top of the food chain. If I'm going to be in corporate America, in the Fortune 500 world, then that means that my destiny lies in being a Fortune 500 CEO. And as I looked at that trajectory, I was like, I'm not going to do that. There's too many stupid people ahead of me. There's too many political games I'm going to have to play. I would rather own 100% of something very small than run something very big 30 years from now. And then here's another thing, man, that I realized, again, kind of like the people that were in my business school class. I was around all of these senior executives that were, their mid-50s, 60s, and they were constantly talking about how they couldn't wait to cash out or retire and go own some small business somewhere close to where they grew up or whatever. And I'm like, at 28, I thought, well, why wait? Why not do that now? And then also, man, I think it's a lot of naivete. At that age, you don't know what you don't know. And so I didn't really realize the risk I was taking. Those same older mentors and people that I was around, they were like, you're going where to do what? And then especially whenever I told them I was going to buy a real estate firm, they were like, you have your real estate license? No. Have you ever sold a house? Nope. Just bought my first one, a few years ago. So it made no sense on paper. But essentially, Mitchell, something clicked in me that realized it was a life I wanted to pursue, not a career. And I don't think I had fully developed that idea at the time, but I know now looking back that that was my why. That was my driver, is that I knew exactly what I wanted my life to look like. I had been trying to fill my life, the void, whatever that God-shaped hole is in my life, with a job, not even a job I enjoyed. Could have cared less at the time. I was a fixed mindset guy that was all about performance, all about image. So for me, you could pay me 20% less as long as the company was good and prestigious and the title sounded good. I went for all the wrong things. And then somewhere along the way that shifted, and I decided I want to be master of my fate. I want to start designing this life. I want to go back to East Texas and put down roots. Never want to have to get on an airplane again unless it's by my own choosing. And all those things culminated and, man, just executed, it's not a testament to any talent that I have. When I tell the story of my escape from corporate America and diving into entrepreneurship, it's not about, look at Jason Wright, wow, what a badass. No, it's about anyone. If you will discover your why and you will find the purpose in your life, then you can take some pretty bold and crazy steps, because when the dips happen, when the hard times come, when like I was, when you're 29 or 30 and feel like you're about to go broke, you will push through that because there's a greater purpose at hand. This isn't just some exercise in how to make money. So all that culminated around that time, man, and then I took the leap.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about some of the goal setting stuff and having the massive transformational purpose, MTP, versus the high hard goals of HHG. And maybe we could get into some of that, but like before, like, were you thinking about it that way in that framework, or were you just like, okay, all these people, who are older than me want this thing, why don't I just go do it right now? And then like kind of a follow-up to that is like, how did you actually do it? Like what are the steps that you took, or like, how'd you approach it?
So I think first of all, when you're younger, like I was just reading this study where NASA scientists back in the day, they wanted to create more creative engineers, right? Engineers by their very nature are very, they're just very analytical. They're not creative. And so what they did was they started giving them these tasks, but allowing them to come up with, trying to figure out how to be more playful with the task at hand. And that's how they separated the creative engineers versus just the typical kind of, X's and O's engineers. And what they realized, this test they gave worked perfectly for children. But here's what's crazy. When they would and they do things like, they would go, okay, here's a jar of M&Ms. What are some other uses for this jar of M&Ms beyond just being a jar of M&Ms? They come up with these creative answers. On the creativity scale, they gave this same test to children, and the children scored higher than the NASA engineers. So you have to ask yourself, why does that happen? Well, what happens is the older we get, the more we get squeezed into this box of these false parameters and limitations that society kind of builds to push you into a lane, right? That's how our entire higher education system is created. It was basically designed to create cogs and wheels, right? After the post-industrial world, especially after post-World War II, it's like, we got a lot of work that needs to be done. We need to go teach you how to go stamp widgets. That's what you're teaching. And so I think for me at that time, a lot of it was just my youth and my naivete, because literally, as far as the only goal setting exercise, which I did pursue, I wrote my goals. I still have written down my goal to purchase a real estate company in 2000. And I guess the goal was 2002. I wrote the goal down, 2003, purchase real estate company in Tyler, Texas. So writing the goals was good, but that even came from that old Yale or Harvard study. No one really knows which one came first. I think and it's now basically urban legend, the Yale study that said the class of 1953, of all of them that had written goals versus non-written goals, how much more wealth they had. Well, that turned out to be, if I had my story right, an urban legend, but Harvard picked up on it in 73 and thought, well, since that really didn't happen, let's actually do it. And the written goals were what led to so much more impact. So that's what I did. I wrote the goal down, and I could look back and go, this is what I'm going to do. And then I really started, and whether it was really practiced or not, I started visualizing a lot back then. Again, I could picture things like one of the things I wrote about in my book, Push Play, Taking Your Life Off Pause, about my experience of escaping from corporate America was I would envision sitting in my office on a Saturday watching ESPN Great Outdoors. And my point, and whenever I tell that story, I was like, now listen, you have to listen to the details of that story. One, it's Saturday. I'm in my office and I don't mind. And I've got a TV in my office and I'm watching ESPN Great Outdoors. So therefore, I was creating a scenario in my mind of a work and something I was building that was not associated with drudgery, travel I didn't want to do, and all those. So the visualization, the very rudimentary goal setting exercises, that's when it happened. Then it was whenever I got older and I ran my firm, and I'm starting to have to really teach people how to set goals, how to execute, how to develop grit, how to get through the dips and the low points and tear down the walls that are inevitably going to pop up in front of you as you try to pursue whatever ambition it is. That's whenever I started really understanding the science and the neurochemical triggers that put us in a state of flow. You know, how do you set the right goals? Going to what you said, what is a massively transformative purpose? Why does that matter? How do you set goals that feed into that? And that's how I live my life now.
I love that. And so 28, you acquire this company, and I assume continue to sort of work to grow it and over the years. And then do you have, did you acquire other companies, or that was the one, or, and do you advise in other companies as well, or what was sort of the progression there?
Yeah, so I did end up acquiring 4 other real estate firms, then sold that company, started another one with a partner, and then sold that. And then I just started looking at, I never really cared about industry. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. I was always excited about doing the deal back then. That was fun. It was fun. The chase is fun. And the deal dying, at least 3 or 4 deaths before it actually goes through, that was always fun for me. What I did not enjoy that much was the operations, the day-to-day operations of a company. I don't like, and I did it all, or good, bad, or indifferent. When I bought that first company, and for years and years, I would do my own payroll. I was the IT guy, the payroll guy. I did, even after it got big enough to where I could hire people and pay them well, I still kept way too much on my plate. I was not a good executive and a good business owner in that regard. But as it went on, I realized what I like doing is growing and developing other leaders. You know, Jim Collins was once told by Peter Drucker, he said, you can do one of 2 things. You can either run a world-class company, or you can help others learn how to build and run a world-class company, but you can't do both. And Jim Collins, that's why Jim Collins is the CEO of his company that has had, if I'm not mistaken, no more than 3 employees in its 25-year career. And that's kind of what I realized, is that I like to go in, and that's what I do now, is I will go in and I will help young entrepreneurs figure out how to scale their business. A lot of what I do, man, is just really easy. It's telling them, don't do what I did. It's helping them overcome those thought processes of like, I can't afford that right now. It's getting them into the mindset of, no, if you want this to grow, you cannot afford not to hire someone to, and if you are the most valuable person in your company, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, if you're the best accountant in your small business, then there's something wrong. That's not where your time is most well spent. So now that's what I really enjoy doing, is helping those entrepreneurs grow and scale their business. Or like one example, I have an advisory client that I'm helping them go from 1st generation founder to 2nd generation. Incredibly great family, good company. There are no problems per se there. They just want to make sure, because the founder he's just a great entrepreneur, and his sons, which is not the case often, the 2nd generation is talented as well, and humble and willing to listen. And so I'm helping guide them through that transition. And literally, Mitchell, a lot of what I do in my advisory work as it relates to that is just hearkening to my past and helping people with all the mistakes that I made to avoid them. But then also, it's just, I'm obsessed with improvement, as you know. And it's reading Jim Collins. It's taking things like flow triggers and understanding how, like Pink's work on in Drive, no, Steven Pinker. Is it Pinker or Pink? I'm drawing a blank right
now. That is a person, but I think you're talking about Daniel Pink who
Daniel
wrote Drive.
Pink. There you go. They wrote
Steven
Drive.
Pink is another author.
There you go. Get them mixed up. So one of the things that was a revelation to me whenever I read Drive that I've since taken to my clients is that most businesses, when it comes to goal setting, they always want to use monetary rewards as the biggest carrot, when in fact, study after study after study shows that is not what science tells us. There's other things. It's autonomy, it's purpose, it's mastery. Those are the things that will drive an employee and keep them happy. So anyway, that's more than you wanted probably, but those are the sorts of things now that I spend my time trying to help people through.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes is a smart man will make a mistake, learn from it, never make the mistake again. But a wise man will find a smart man and learn from his mistakes and not make it in the first place. And it's definitely a little bit of a platitude, and in reality, it doesn't really work like that, because big believer in to actually learn, you need to learn by doing and experiencing. But I do think that learning from others, sharing stories, reading, listening to podcasts is a good way to say like, oh, well, I didn't even know this was a thing. So once I do insert myself into that situation, I at least now am a little more aware. And maybe you could avoid something altogether. So I guess knowing what you know now, is there any particular lesson that took you the longest to learn, or that you would sort of change along your journey if you were to go back?
Yeah, and you sort of touched on it. I thought I had to do everything myself, and I thought that asking for help was a sign of weakness in a lot of different things, man. I thought, like, for example, in business school, I thought if I couldn't whip the hell out of a spreadsheet and do an incredible pro forma and business analysis or something like that, that somehow I was lesser. Well, that's dumb. I'm training. First of all, I go in as a business owner, and ultimately I want to be a business executive. Well, if you have the CEO of a company, imagine that. Imagine the CEO of any Fortune 500 company sitting there analyzing a spreadsheet, trying to discover the weighted average cost of capital or something. If you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. But I thought I had to know this and I had to be good at it. That was dumb. And so kind of also to tie into what you said, the greatest takeaway from graduate school, when people ask me, was it worth it to get your MBA? I learned some stuff, but more importantly, I learned the power of asking questions. And not just that, but in graduate school, business school, what it taught me, and I think it would teach anybody, is not just one, having the confidence, because you're surrounded, especially in a program like Cox and an executive MBA program like Cox, where again, everyone was smarter than me. I was still waiting for them at any time to say, hey, Jason, could you come with us? We made a mistake. You need to leave. I really, man, I had that much imposter syndrome going on during that time. But when I saw people that I thought were and that I knew were so much smarter than me, asking questions that I had as well, that helped. But then also learning, not knowing, having to be the guy that puts together the financial analysis, but to be able to know what questions to ask that young investment banker that did whip that spreadsheet all night, asking them the right questions. What bond rate did you use when you came up with your hurdle rate? What are your assumptions for growth? What are you sure about that? Have you seen interest rates are spiking? So are you using interest? What bond rate are you looking at? Understanding conceptually those things. So I think, man, the biggest thing I've learned is be willing to ask questions and know that everyone hates to be asked to do a favor, but they love to give advice. And there are a lot of brilliant, smart people out there that if you go to them and say, I need some advice, man, one, it shows that you have respect for them, and two, they love to share what advice they have. And so asking questions, that's some things I didn't do well. I tried to take on too much on my own, and I suffered at times for it. But so that's one of the things I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I was reflecting on my school experience recently too, and I think I went to a bigger school, Indiana University, and the lecture rooms were large, and I never asked a single question, just because I always sort of, and I've evolved, but I've always sort of wanted to let me research and figure it out first, and then if it's an actual good question, I'll ask. But I since have learned of I almost do the opposite now, where even if it's like a meeting or some sort of interaction, I have this like unwritten rule where I have to ask a question, right? Mm-hmm. And most people might think of like, oh, you don't want to look dumb or whatever, but chances are other people are wondering the exact same thing. And it just like adds a level of like, it humanizes the interaction. And it leads to other good things. So yeah, big advocate of asking questions. And I think it's a subcomponent of what you touched on is this confidence, right? Because like early on, you don't want to look dumb and you're not really sure about, the value that you're bringing to the world. So I guess to recap what you're saying, it's like, don't even worry about that. Just ask questions and don't worry so much what other people think.
Yeah, and I guess I can't remember who it was. It was a French philosopher, I think, that said, "Don't judge a man by his answers, but judge him by the quality of his answers, but judge him by the quality of his questions." People respect someone that's not. Now there is an obnoxious quality to somebody that's always. There's that person again, business school. I could name some names here. That just obnoxious person that was always asking questions that did not yield benefit. But if you're someone who is thoughtful, and if I were to ask you, and you were explaining something to me, and I said, "Wait a minute, Mitchell, could you go over that one more time? I didn't quite get that." Then I think that, first of all, there's a sign of confidence on my part that I'm comfortable enough to ask you the question. There's also a respect factor that I really want to grasp what you're saying. And when you just start to understand all this, and again, man, I think all of it ties into something that I've reached. It happened around 40, of just realizing who you really are, owning who you are, and acting on the real you, not the perceived you, not the perception you put out that you are, but just be comfortable in your own skin. And man, that's harder. That's harder than a lot of people realize, because we all want to be respected, and we have this idea of what respectable looks like, what's to be admired. But at the end of the day, just be you and own it and get better in the process.
And you think you realized that at 40 or prior to that, or?
I think it was after, as we've talked about one time I'm sitting in my office. It was after I'd been divorced. I'd sold my businesses. I was basically listless. I mean, I'm the overachiever, type A. I'd done all these things in my late 20s, early 30s. I peaked essentially in my mind. And around the age of 40, I always tell people the cool thing about turning 40 is your I don't give a crap meter just pegs. You all of a sudden realize potentially half my life is over. And kind of like Steve Jobs once said, the day you realize that we're all going to die, you start looking at life a lot differently. You take much more, and you just realize that all the things you've tried to appear to be, who cares? Just be you. And so, yeah, it was around that time that I really just started pursuing things again, kind of like I did when I was 28, that I didn't give a damn what anybody thought about it. Again, I'm not going to be shuffling down the road in a robe and not caring, just be some complete savant moron. But I'm going to pursue things that might not make sense, like a podcast, like writing books, like starting the Vitruvian Letter. Do these things that don't make sense when you live surrounded by insurance salespeople and lawyers and doctors and just very traditional folks that do traditional things. And you're the guy doing all these, you're a creator. If somebody thinks I'm stupid for that, or that I'm trying to be something I'm not or whatever, little do they know, no, I'm being who I really am, and I'm comfortable with that. And frankly, I don't care if you get it or not. And that, to me, man, that's the key, is when you get to the point where the things that you're doing, that you're pursuing, and you care what your wife and your children, those closest to you, know about it so they can help join in the support. But with everybody else, whether they get it or not, who the hell cares? Who cares? So
right.
That's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah, and there's this concept of like, I've written about like push versus pull, or some people call it like light versus dark energy. And basically the concept is like, the light energy is, or what you're pulled into, just naturally happen of things like you mentioned, the podcast or the newsletter or whatever naturally energizes you, versus like what you're pushing. It feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill, or you're doing it for more of like the dark energy is this like external sort of motivator. And it makes sense that the light energy and that the being pulled into things is a much richer energy source for people. And so it's almost like you've tried a bunch of things, and you have, in this most recent chapter, maybe found the like you seem to be a high energy guy, right? Like you're talking about working out and testing all these things on health and having a podcast. You're writing a book. I think you might have already written one as well, and you write on the blog. How do you think about energy maintenance or just overall energy level?
Yeah. So one of the things that you kind of touched on there that I think everyone needs to realize is that, can't call her first, Karen Duckworth, maybe she coined the phrase or came up with the idea that essentially grit is where passion and passion and perseverance intersect, right? So regarding the pushing the rock uphill and the light energy and dark energy, just because you find your passion in this thing you love, like what you're doing right now, you're creating a new podcast, or the writings, the newsletter that you have, which is phenomenal. It's not always easy. There are days that even though you're doing something you quote unquote love, it's going to take perseverance. But what happens, where the grit comes in, is where you're doing something that you love, that you go, I'm not going to quit because this is feeding into my life's purpose, right? My massively transformative purpose. And so that's where the energy comes from. So like, again, people that view life in their narrow box that society has defined, they'll look at a guy like me and they'll look at my background. They'll go, why are you not pursuing things right now? Why are you using this time talking to Mitchell on a podcast when you should be out crushing it in real estate, putting together a $5 million real estate portfolio this month? Why are you not doing that? And I'm like, well, because the work that it would take to do that, then it'd be pushing the rock uphill and looking back and going, what the hell did I do that for? Money? What? As opposed to going through like building this online course I'm building right now, which at times has me on the floor wanting to beat my head and want to cry and just going, you freaking moron. But yet I've got the sustainability, I've got the energy to push through it, because I know that when I have just the slightest little success, because it feeds into my bigger purpose, that dopamine rush, it will hit. And I'll go, I got that lesson up. Okay. And then eventually, like right now, I've had my freaking app that I'm having developed rejected from the Apple store, I guess now 5 times, because I'll leave one little thing out. Every time it's like a punch in the gut. But you know what? I go, it's okay. This feeds into my massively transformative purpose. It's worth continuing to push that boulder uphill, because eventually it's going to be there. It's going to change my life. It's hopefully going to help other people. It's going to feed into this bigger ecosystem I'm building. And all of that together, that's where the energy comes from, man. And I think just, again, understanding how our neurochemistry works, dude, you can tap into a wellspring of energy from that. But you got to understand your body. You got to understand your mind. Again, this isn't all for vanity. I want to look good. I want to be healthy, but for the aesthetics of it. But more than anything, man, I want to feel good. I want to think well. I want to get the absolute. I want today, God willing, today, Mitchell Cohen, and everyone listening to this show on, we're recording this it's May 19th, right? May 19th, 2022. Okay, my hope is that the absolute best version of Jason Wright that's ever been put out, you're seeing it and you're witnessing it right now. That's my goal. The best version of me shows up each and every freaking day. And guess what? Tomorrow's version, I'm sorry, Mitchell, but tomorrow's going to be better. If we recorded this tomorrow, an even better version, if I do this right, an even better version will show up, and it might not even be noticeable. And because I had that mindset, that's what's driving me. That's the energy that keeps me pushing forward and forward and forward. And, as cheesy as my motto may sound, improve always and always, that's what it's about. It's that constantly trying to optimize a little bit more.
Yeah. No, I think that there's a similar concept I've played around with writing about, but it's this thing where, like, basically exactly what you said, right? Like today we are like you were the smartest you've ever been today. Like always with myself, I've had the most experiences to draw from. I've learned the most that, I have ever. And it's like same with everyone. And then once you was just talking to a friend about this the other day. It's like once you pair, so that's great. That's cool and all. But like once you pair that with, say, I also happen to be like physically maybe in the best shape of my life. Like I've been back into running more too. So like I'm getting probably not back into like marathon shape, but getting closer to that. I'm not training for anything right now, but like it doesn't have to be like the best, but like once you have, peak mental fitness, peak physical fitness, like peak healthy relationships, like all these things sort of start to compound where the sum is far greater. The whole is far greater than the sum of its parts. And then you just like look for other ways to like stack those of like, okay, I want more of this. I want more, cool conversations. I want to write more. I want to do, better at my job. I want to start this side hustle. I want to do, insert the thing that you really want, and you get energized by it. And so I really resonate with that. And then the other thing I was thinking about is like, well, I guess what is, you've mentioned the concept of a massive transformational purpose. Like, what is yours, or can you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one quick way to sum it up would be that almost every conversation I have is like this one, that these are the conversations, that it's not about politics, that it's not about, where are we going drinking later tonight? It's not about who won the Super Bowl, but it's the conversations like we're having. So the improve always and always concept came from, I'm reading Da Vinci's biography by Walter Isaacson, and I first learned of the story behind the Vitruvian Man, which essentially came from an architect during the reign of Augustus, and was not the first drawing of Vitruvian Man that Da Vinci did, but Da Vinci used Vitruvian Man as his ideal. This was what he was trying to create, the perfectly proportioned man. He tried to draw it. And so I thought to myself, well, what does the perfectly proportioned human look like? Spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally? What does that look like? And that seems like a worthy endeavor. And so that's whenever this whole thing started. And the reason why it's kind of a selfish endeavor, in that I firmly believe that if I am in fact the absolute best version of myself, then the fruit of that will spill over into my fellow man. You said it. I mean, the reason why you have me on this podcast, and why the people that are going to listen to this, the only reason why is because I've done these things. So hopefully my prayer, my hope is that someone will listen to this, and even if they couldn't see me, or they guess they have to hear me, but it's like, it has nothing to do with me. I hope they take something away from it and go, man, I don't know what that old dude has, but Mitchell's right. He's obviously got some energy. He's doing some pretty cool stuff that I know I'm capable of doing too. And then hopefully they'll go out and do whatever that thing is that really charges them, so that if I'm ever blessed enough to meet them, they're happy, they're full of joy, they're healthy, and they go, and to me, the ultimate would be, I heard you on the Mitchell Cohen podcast. I want you to know that I went out and walked for 2 miles for the first time in 20 years, and I haven't stopped since. I feel amazing. I read a book for the first time since I was in high school, and I was swept away. I haven't had a drink in 2 months. Again, I always have to put the disclaimer out. Drinking is fine. I don't care. It has nothing to do with scruples. But to me, it's like, I decided it conflicts with what I want to have mentally and physically, so I don't do it anymore. So somebody said to me, hey, you know what? I cut my alcohol consumption by 30% and I feel better. That's what I want, man. I want as many people feeling joyful, hopeful, happy. And I think when you start this thing we have that's a body and a mind is an absolute freaking miracle. You may have heard recently, I did some writing about it, and I did a podcast about it. I was at NASA a few weeks ago. And Mitchell, I guess maybe the older I get, the more I appreciate the achievements of mankind. I'm standing there looking at a freaking rocket, and I go, that once only existed in the minds of human beings, and yet there it is. There that thing is. We are truly magnificent creatures. And not only that, with every single thing, every single resource, every piece of material that it took to make that rocket existed in the time of Julius Caesar. Think about that. That's insane. Now, it hadn't all been put together because we had not evolved to the point where we could put all that matter together to create a rocket, but it was all here. But now it is. And so I say this as a preface because while we may not realize it, we, the top of the food chain, the most dynamic creatures on planet Earth, are now living in my opinion, and I think you'd be hard pressed to disagree with me, the most amazing times on Earth. There has never been a better time to be a member of the human species. It doesn't feel like that all the time because we're humans. We're fallible. We mess stuff up. We break stuff. But it's truly, and when you start to get your brain around that, like, and that's what it has for me, man. I'm more curious than ever. I want to optimize more than ever. I want to soak every last bit of joy out of this experience. And hopefully, in my mission, the reason why I do all of this, going back to my massively transformative purpose, is to write books, create a podcast, create courses, do anything I possibly can to reach as many human beings as possible. To not to say, Jason Wright, you changed my life. To me, it's like, Jason Wright, you inspired me to change my life. And now I'm doing this, 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 and this. And I'm more joyful and abundant than I've ever been in my entire life. Oh, and by the way, I hope that they never even mention their income as a result of that happiness. I want it to be from things that they already possess between their ears and in their heart, all of that. If I can inspire as many people as possible to get that, Mitchell, then that's what feeds into my massively transformative purpose.
So the MTP, massively transformative purpose, is sort of kind of like the big goal, like kind of like the BHAG, big hairy audacious goal, or maybe like the Google's OKR, like objective key results. It's like, that's the objective. And then is it the high hard goals that are kind of like the milestones towards that you can measure?
Yep. That's it, man. So that's where it comes into writing books. Writing a book is freaking hard. You have to deal with rejection. I'm a terrible editor. You subscribe to my newsletter, you know that I'm an abysmal editor. And so, but writing 500 words every single day, whether they suck or whether you think they're good, writing every day, creating a newsletter every single week. I don't want a week to go by that the Vitruvian letter doesn't come out, and then create. So that's a high, hard goal, but then you got to get really clear about it. Okay. So just creating a newsletter is one thing, but creating a newsletter that has impactful information that you actually think could help some folks, that makes it clear. And what does that look like? It's about nutrition. It feeds into the things that you have learned, have made you joyful and happy and leading a more fulfilling life. So what can you share with others? So that's where the high, hard goals come in, is just shipping the work, just shipping out good work on a consistent basis. And having a podcast that has no less than 100,000 downloads a year. That's hard. And that's a high, hard goal. Then it comes down to those daily goals that will feed into that, to make sure you stay consistent, that you put out the work, that you go seek out the people to do the interviews. Those are the high, hard goals that I set for myself that feed into. And the cool thing is, man, when you learn that they are high, hard goals, but you can leverage the pain and the hardship and you can get through it, because at the end of the day, it's feeding into that much bigger purpose. That's what'll sustain you.
Just for like people listening to this too, of like to make it actionable for them. I think a big thing, like, you definitely have tried a lot of things and seem to have honed in on this vision and purpose. For a lot of people, it's like, they're like, yo, I don't really know what I like. I haven't tried enough things. Still figuring out. Like, I'm just going to go back to my inbox because like I'm busy at work. And I think in order to simplify it is like giving ourselves the permission to say, like, it's actually going to change, right? And so just come up with something like today, this week, of like, okay, maybe it sounds like this. And was actually talking to a mentor of mine recently, and he was explaining how, for when we're talking about things like, purpose or your why, just come up with like a 3-word phrase of like, his wife was a dentist, and she was she got into it because she enjoys helping others, and it got to the point where they were celebrating which dentist office had the most sales like each month, and like, it just felt weird to her to be like, yo, that's not really like why I got into this. And so she was looking to maybe do something different. And her 3-word phrase was to help the helpless, because she realized like she actually liked, helping out the people who maybe couldn't afford it, or who just needed, help and guidance. And so like, that will change and maybe since has, but like, and I think his was to like help unlock potential or something along those lines. And so I was reflecting on it myself. At first I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like that one, maybe I'll just do that one. He's like, no, dude, you gotta come up with your own, because like otherwise it won't fit. But like, the main takeaway was like, it's gonna change, so just come up with something and then change as you go. So I think that fits into the, whether you look at it like an OKR or the massive transformational purpose, however you look at it, just like come up with something and just have that be the working hypothesis and then just like get going. You could always change it later.
And you also have to do the work to remove the distractions. You have to, first of all, you have to be honest with yourself. Generally, every time you pick up your phone to look at, Instagram or social media, if you're doing that too much, it's because you're looking for a little dopamine hit. It's the exact same thing, same chemical that we get from cocaine, right? And we walk around now with these little IVs basically mentally connected to our phones. So be willing to get alone with yourself. Be willing to be bored for a while. Bored is good. Sit and look at your, take inventory of your thoughts, and don't be afraid, and go through some exercises. Get crazy. Create a Christmas wish list of the absolute perfect job for you, and then a wish list of all the things that you could have if you could have anything you wanted in the next 12 months. And then look for the intersections. Look to see if, because you'll discover crazy things. You'll discover, I guess it's what Stephen Kotler always says, playing in the intersections. When you start to figure out the things you love to do and the things that you want to have, and if you can start to find some cross-referencing there, you may go, holy hell, I love cars and I love to work with my hands. All these years I've been wanting to be a mechanic and had no clue. And I love it. And that's what you maybe you do or don't pursue that, but just there, it doesn't, and I think you're very smart in what you say in that, yes, it doesn't, you're not going to have it all figured out. I want to solve the climate change issue. I want to eradicate the planet of AIDS. I want to solve world hunger. Okay. That's okay. That's huge. It should be that big, but then whittle it down on those hard goals of what you can personally do in your day-to-day life that feeds towards that massively transformative purpose. And it'll come. But I think, man, Mitchell, just a lot of people don't give themselves permission to have those dreams. It goes back to what I said earlier. The older we get, the harder, because we get steeped in reality. We get caught in the curse of knowledge. We've had too many experiences in our lives of things that didn't work out, high hopes we had that have only fallen flat. Don't let those be the guide. Look at I use this one, and this applies, I think, to most of the people that we're going to interact with one day, on any given day. There was a time when Mitchell Cohen could not read. You couldn't read, dude. Now you can. That's a huge achievement. That's a huge accomplishment. It's a blessing that's going to last you for the rest of your life. I told you, I had a fixed mindset. I used to think, I'm bad at math. I've got to be a performer. I may suck at what I'm doing, but as long as I look good doing it, I'm good. You got to get over that. You got to develop a growth mindset. So back to what you're saying, I can't think of anything I want to do. Okay, but there has been a time where you decided where you wanted to go to dinner. You did. You had no idea where you wanted to go to dinner, and then you decided, this is where I want to go to dinner. Then it was, I have no idea what kind of car I want. And then you decided on the car and you bought the car. Where you wanted to live, where you wanted to take a job. You've made these decisions before. So get your mind in you got to remind your brain, hey, we've done this before, and then just grow it from there.
Right. And you mentioned like the fixed versus growth mindset. Curious. And I think you've mentioned too on your podcast, or maybe he even was a guest on your podcast, but he was a MLB pitcher, Josh Tomlin.
Yeah.
And
I'm headed to Josh's house after we finish up here. We're working on some business stuff together.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And so I think you said that he wasn't born to be a pitcher, and so he just like put in the work and did it. Like, was there a particular inflection point for his story or your story of like? I think people hear the words like growth or six, are like, oh yeah. Like when I'm in a good mood, I correct myself and think, but like, what does that actually look like for either him or you?
Yet, the word yet. If you can just, first of all, that's what Carol Dweck, that's how she starts it. She's the one that's done all the research on this. She said like Josh, whenever he was handed a baseball, and I think this happened whenever he was either at Texas Tech or in his first year in the minors, they said, you're only going to pitch. And he thought to himself, well, I've never only pitched. I can't throw a ball faster than 86 miles per hour. I'm not tall. I have none of the natural gifts of a pitcher. But here's what he said to himself, but if that's what it takes for me to get to the major leagues and stay there, I'm going to figure out what I am good at. And that thing I'm good at is I can throw the ball and place it anywhere I want. And Josh Tomlin, if you look at his career, he has now he gave up a lot of home runs, not a big strikeout pitcher, but hardly ever walked a batter. The dude is absolutely precise with his pitches. So he said, I'm not a naturally gifted pitcher, but I'm going to be a pitcher. I'm just not one yet. And that's what I think the thing is, and it goes back to what I said about reading. Those of us like me, who I automatically thought either you're blessed with a lot of intelligence or you're not. I'm not good at math. So, but I can learn because I've learned other things before. I did learn algebra. I may not have ever been good at it, but I did learn it. So I can learn it. And that's the crux of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Is this is the key too. You're not identified by the success or failure of the task. If I end up doing horrible on a math test, that doesn't mean I'm a stupid jackass. That means I'm not good enough at math yet to perform well on that test. And so I'm not identified. It doesn't shatter who I am. My identity and my intelligence are separate, and it's all a challenge. And that the growth mindset, that's what they do. They game everything. You make it a challenge. You know, and just get ready. When you start looking at your first downloads of your podcast, you're going to go, holy crap, everybody thinks my podcast sucks. Screw this. A fixed mindset will go, I'm out. I'm not good at podcasting. A growth mindset says, I'm going to get better and better and better. I'm going to figure out what makes people download a podcast. What can I deliver based on my gifts and talents that will get them to listen? That's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset just says, I am what I am, can't improve upon it. Growth says, I'm just not there yet.
Yeah, I like the sort of evidence-based approach, right? Of like, you know, you can't really trick yourself into just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like do that. But like, once you think of real tangible things of like the reading example, or I'm learning Spanish right now. So I go to this class. My friend Gabby teaches this class on Mondays to a group of us. And so I'm reminded of like, oh dang, like one of like having a textbook, like and walking somewhere like with a textbook is like, I'm so excited this time around, where like last time I was walking around with a textbook, I didn't think learning was cool at all. And now I think it's the coolest. But one of the concepts was like, you know, Gabby, she is Mexican. And so she speaks very fluently and sometimes quickly. And another person in the class she's a doctor and she's a teacher. She used to live in Chile, and her Spanish was pretty good, but now it's been a few years, so she's relearning it. And she was explaining how the concept of your zone of proximal development, and, you know, it's kind of very similar to flow, where it's like wherever you are right now, there are things that are going to be way far outside, like 2 rings outside of that zone. And that's too hard to get to. And that's sometimes like hearing the native Mexican speaker like, whoa, what did she just say? And instead, the zone of proximal development is just right outside, a little bit outside of where we are right now, but it's reachable. And her point was that sometimes it's easier to learn from people who are just a little bit further along than you. For example, her Spanish, when she says things and animates and breaks things down, it's easier for us to understand than sometimes the teacher. And so I think that's like a microcosm for life too. It's like, we often see like, oh, I want this thing, but it's very far. I don't know what the next steps I could take today or next week would be to get that. But if you surround yourself and get in the habit of breaking things down to say like, oh, okay, well, like, what is my zone of proximal development? Well, it's either learning from this person or it's doing this thing. And it's reminding yourself of these small steps like you're talking about, of like, you know, they figured out how to build a rocket ship. We figured out how to read and learn. And so, yeah, it's just about like putting in the reps. And I think that's a great framework to wrap around it.
And real quick on that, you mentioned something. It's just like if you go out and play tennis, you're going to play, if you find somebody that's much better than you to go play with, you're going to naturally play better. You don't have time to sit there and second guess your forehand or your backstrokes. You just have to react, because they're just, the ball screaming over the net coming at you. React. It's the same reason why extreme sports people do what they do, these almost, you know, superhuman feats, is because they don't have time to stop and think. They're in the middle of it. And this will put your brain into that state of flow to where it silences everything else, put you into a state of tunnel vision. And yes, there will be struggle, but what a lot of people don't, and unfortunately, Mitchell, a lot is being preached against any form of struggle or hardship or whatever. Man, if you want, other than going out and snorting a bunch of cocaine, if you want a good dopamine rush that will also lead to long-term sustainable happiness, you got to get to that struggle point. What you said, you want to bend but not break. You know, I don't want to go sit down and try to my first chess match to be with James Altucher. That would be just, I would get, you know, I'd get destroyed, right? And it'd be too hard to even try to keep up. But if I can know how good I am and know who's just significantly better than me, and to go up against that struggle, then just hanging in there, fighting through that struggle will give me the dopamine rush to make me come back and do it again and again and again. Because what we do is we train our brain that pushing beyond that struggle releases the dopamine, and the brain goes, oh, it's an if-then. If I do this struggle, if I do this hard thing, then I learn a little more and it feels really good. I'll do that again and again and again and again until all of a sudden that proximity that you discussed, it's even expanded wider and wider and wider.
Totally. And I know we're coming up on the hour right now, and I didn't get to a handful of the things that I wanted to, which is fine too, because it's been amazing. Might have to keep it for a part two. But the last thing I'll leave you with is, I was reflecting the other day, writing on what are the smallest things in my life that have or do bring me the biggest amount of joy. And it could be simple things as like iced coffee, or like the morning run to like when like the other runners just kind of give you that nod and just say like, what's up? Like, I love that. And it's like this concept of people paying things forward. And I had a whole list of them, but I'm curious, any stick out for you in your life?
Let me turn my camera a little bit. That shelf full of books back there.
Nice.
I get excited just looking at it right now. I mean, if those of you who may watch this, and those of you who can't see it, it's a bookshelf crammed with books. That is, my God, I have no idea how many life's works piled on one shelf in my house that I have access to. So that's one. An unbelievable cup of coffee with Mrs. Wright is like pure heaven. When she and I are together on Sunday morning, and you've seen the mugs, the hubby, the wifey mugs, sitting on our back patio having coffee, man, that's living, man. That's the best. And I know we didn't get to talk about it, but you did mention I'm a goofball. Yes. Find things to laugh about. Be willing to make fun of yourself. I love to make people laugh, even at my own expense. I have no inhibitions. I don't care. My ego's not attached to any of it. And so that's another small pleasure. If I can figure out a way, I took my youngest daughter's 21st birthday was yesterday, and I sent her voice memos with no less than, I think, maybe 15 different characters I had developed over the course of her life. Little funny things from bedtime stories, these goofy characters I've created, making my daughters laugh. And they're knowing their dad may never be the president of the United States. He may never be the richest guy they know, but he made them laugh, and they'll remember that. And that's a great joy, being able to make people laugh.
Amazing. So if anyone's listening to this today, go make someone laugh or have a laugh yourself. I think that's like, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, we might not be here next week. Nothing's guaranteed. So might as well enjoy the ride. So with that being said, Jason, you're the man. Super appreciate your time. This was awesome. Where can people check you out?
Jason,
you have the
right
podcast,
now,
newsletter.
Yeah. JasonRightNow.com. You can go to JasonRightNow.com, and actually you'll get prompted to sign up for the Vitruvian letter. Please sign up to the newsletter. It's just where I encapsulate all the things I'm doing over the course of a week to improve always and always. That's my motto. Listen to the Jason Wright Show, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And then, yeah, that's it. I'd love to hear from you. If there's something I'm doing you heard today and you just want to DM me through Insta, which is Jason Right Now, or anything, I'm an encourager. I am a big encourager. Anyone that's met me, if I had all the money in the world, if I was completely independently wealthy, I'd probably spend my time just one-on-ones. I love sharing whatever gifts I've got to try to make people realize that, man, this life is a short vapor of a ride, and it can be really fun. It took me a long time to realize that, a long time. And now that I have, I want to share it every chance I get. So that's it, brother. Love to hear from you.
Amazing. I subscribe, love it, listen to the podcast, love what you're putting out, encourage you to keep on going. Everyone check them out. And Jason Wright, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, brother.